Okay. Good to see everyone. Good morning. If you don't know me, my name is Michael. I'm one of the pastors here at LSCC. And today we are finally concluding this sermon series called Questioning Christianity. And today we're going to go through this topic that's called, Does God Still Work Today? All right. Does God still work today? And I'm going to start off with something that is almost completely unrelated, but all right. Here are three movies, okay? Fellowship of the Ring, A New Hope, Star Wars, and The Dark Knight. It's not a hard question. It's not a hard question, but what do these three movies have in common? Anybody? Okay, good and evil, yes, okay. Certain plot elements, sure. Even more basic than that, at least I thought. Okay. Oh, they all have weapons? Okay. A savior? Okay. These are not things I expected, but they're all accurate. There's more than one right answer. There is an answer I'm looking for. What do they all have in common? Yeah. There are heroes in each of them. That is true too. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah?
There's bad guys too.
What was that? There are greater things involved. That is also accurate. Anybody else? Superpowers, what was that? Okay, there is fighting in each of these. Okay, one more guess. One last guess. What was that? Well, Dark Knight is the second movie, but that is a good guess. That is a good guess. That's all good. Good guess. That was your answer, Carter? Oh. That's not bad anyway. At least that was the wavelength I was going for. All right. They're all, was that? Thank you very much. Yes. They're all part of a trilogy. All right. I will say, I really did not expect that to take a long time. That's okay. This is not important at all, but this is out of curiosity. 3 franchises here, 3 trilogies. How would you rank them, or specifically, which one do you think is the best out of these 3? So who would vote? Raise your hand if you would vote for the Lord of the Rings. Oh, okay, very good. All right. I don't want to show my bias. Who would vote for the original Star Wars trilogy? Okay. Are people voting twice? I see a lot of similar hands. All right, and then anybody want to vote for the Dark Knight trilogy? Okay. All right. All right. Awesome. Good. Okay. I honestly, I was trying to think what my answer would be, and I really don't know either. I need to chew on it some more. But anyway, I love a good trilogy. I'll never get to make like a movie trilogy. Maybe my brother-in-law will one day, but I'll never get to make a movie trilogy. But in my mind, today's sermon, at least in my mind, kind of in some sense completes like my own trilogy. Okay, this is my own attempt at like 3 things that go together. Okay, these are 3 topics that two that we have covered and one that we're about to cover. So this is our first sermon in this series was Is it rational to believe in God? We also covered Is it rational to believe in Jesus? And then today we're going to cover Does God still work today? And these 3 topics in my mind, they kind of go together. 3 for addressing one big topic. And you might be wondering, how do they go together? Let me just kind of recap these a little bit for you. In my mind, these 3 questions, these 3 topics, they kind of each addressed a different area of truth, a different field of truth that kind of speaks to the accuracy, the validity of Christianity. So the first question that we covered was, is it rational to believe in God? And in my mind, that kind of covered 2 things, 2 fields. Science, specifically cosmology, the study of the universe, and then also philosophy. So why are we the way we are? Why do we believe in human rights? That's what we talked about, right? Why do we believe in right and wrong? And does that point us more to a God? Or does that point us more towards a world without a God? That was the first question. The second question that we kind of covered was, is it rational to believe in Jesus? And to me, that's like almost entirely a historical question. It's really getting at, is Jesus a real person? And if he is real, did he really do the things that we think he did? Did he really do these miracles? And most importantly, did he really rise again? And we covered that in our series. Today's topic is about, in my mind, something entirely different. Today's topic is about experience, the field of experience. And in today's question, we're going to see, does God still work, not just in history, not just 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, but does he still work today? Are there pieces of evidence that we can see of God working today? That's what we're going to explore. Now, I'll just say that for myself, this topic became really important to me for personal reasons. A couple years ago, we had this really rough season where over the span of like 1 year, like an awful year, we had 3 friends of ours that had some form of cancer. So, for instance, one of our friends, she used to be one of our youth leaders at our home church. She's a mom with 2 daughters. She ended up finding out fairly traumatically that she had a form of stomach cancer. That was really hard for us. She's not that old. She was in her early 40s. It was really shocking. And then a few months later, we had one of our childhood friends. They have a family of 4 kids, and their oldest kid, their oldest son, in fact, he got this form of leukemia, which is really rough. I mean, he was probably 11 at the time. So that was really awful for us as well to hear. And then thirdly, we became friends with this family that was going through a lot. Many of you know this family. She's also a mom of 2 kids, and this mom had a late-stage form of myeloma cancer. It's a cancer that targets the blood cells. Her husband had already passed away a few years prior. So she's a widow, and now she's going through her own battle with cancer. So I just want to say, thankfully, I praise God. All these individuals are still with us, so I'm very thankful for that. The 2 moms are in relatively stable condition with ongoing treatment. The boy that I mentioned with leukemia, his leukemia is in remission. So I'm very thankful for that. But I must say that was a very difficult period of time for myself, for our family, obviously for these families. It was really hard for me to pray. I'll just put that out there. I think the most difficult thing was trying to read accounts of God's healing in Scripture. That was the most challenging thing for me. So, for example, somewhere around that time I was trying to read through the Gospel of Luke, just personally for my own devotional time. And obviously in the Gospel of Luke and any of the Gospel accounts, there are so many stories of Jesus healing. And this is one example. Luke 5 here states that the Lord's healing power was strongly with Jesus. A few verses down in verse 26, it says, everyone was gripped with great wonder and awe, and they praised God, exclaiming, we have seen amazing things today. And I just remember coming across this passage, several other passages, and just finding it honestly really hard to read. I almost had to literally kind of put my Bible down Because I just had this huge disconnect in my mind. Like in my mind, theologically, I believed that Jesus can heal. It says it right there. It says it all throughout the Gospels. It says it all throughout the Scriptures. Jesus can heal. The Lord can heal. I had no doubt about the accuracy of that truth. But in my heart, I just had this nagging question of, does God still do this today? Does Jesus still heal today? And if so, why don't we see more of that today? I found that for me, my heart kind of went through this path of feelings. Maybe you resonate with this as well. I went from wondering in certain spots, does God still work today? And then quickly my heart would travel towards wondering, does God still care about me and these individuals? And then it moves down the line to wondering, am I sure God even exists? And I just found it amazing how quickly you kind of get to that last question. Is God even real? So this is a journey I went on personally, and I just want to show you a little bit of what I researched in this time, what I went through, whether or not God still heals today, whether or not he still does miracles. I'm going to walk you through my own journey with that. Now, I'm all about evidence, but before we get to kind of the stuff that I found, first I want to address a couple questions that you might have in your mind on this topic, questions I had as well. First question, is it foolish to believe in miracles? Legitimate question. I'm sure many of you, maybe all of us, have kind of wondered this, right? Does it make sense to even believe in miracles? Maybe in theory you're open to it. But you've also probably wondered, like, is it silly? Like, we're modern people. Don't we just know that things like miracles don't happen? Maybe you've wondered that, and there is no shame in wondering that. I wondered that. One of the most famous arguments against miracles is this one right here by this guy named David Hume. David Hume was a philosopher who lived in the 1700s, and this was kind of his argument against miracles in a nutshell. It's pretty famous. He puts it like this. He says, first off, nature always behaves the same way. That's his first premise. There are rules to nature. Okay? There's gravity, there's cause and effect. There are biological rules that we see in nature. They always happen. That's his first premise. Second, he says, however, miracles, what are they claiming to do? They're claiming to break the normal rules of nature. Miracles, in essence, they like violate nature. Okay? Miracles are claiming to do impossible things. Therefore, number 3, he says, we should not believe in miracles. Because miracles, again, they violate what we know about nature, what we know about reality. Okay? That's his argument in a nutshell. It seems pretty reasonable. However, this came out in like the 1700s. There has been a lot of time since then. A lot of philosophers have noted, what's the issue with this argument? And there are many. Here's the main one. Why can't God disrupt the rules of nature? Why, in theory, why? Everybody knows that nature kind of operates a certain way, right? Nature typically behaves a certain way, but if God exists, in theory, why can't he disrupt the path of a disease? Why can't he, in theory, disrupt the path of an injury? You know, in a different way, we as human beings, we disrupt rules all the time. Okay, for instance, I never use props. I felt like I finally should for this. Here is a pen, all right? I was going to use a ball of slime that I had in my car. I hate slime, but it's the only thing I had. Livy did not allow me to. So here's a pen, all right? Here's a very sought-after LSCC pen. It has the fidget spinner, right? This is very sought-after. Anyway, here's a pen. Now, obviously, if I hold the pen up here and then, I drop it, it just falls to the ground because nature, right? I mean, that's just gravity. But obviously, if I hold the pen here and then before it falls, I catch it, I'm just disrupting what we typically see. I'm disrupting its path. I'm disrupting it from falling to the ground, disrupting gravity in a sense. That's essentially what a miracle is. A miracle is basically just disrupting the course of something terrible that's trying to happen, like a disease, like an accident, something like that. Here's another example. Let's say as you get older, you develop cataracts. Anybody know anybody here with cataracts? A couple. Well, okay, a couple. All right. Cataracts are these cloudy parts that develop on your eye. It makes your vision really blurry. And the tough thing about cataracts is that on their own, they'll never go away. You can't just sleep it off. You can't wait a few months. Biologically, if you leave it untreated, cataracts will never go away. But if you get a surgery, right, if you get an eye surgeon to just operate on your eyes, it's a really standard procedure, they can take away your cataracts. So in some sense, when a surgeon operates on somebody's eyes, what's the surgeon doing? The surgeon is just disrupting the normal course of the health, or in this case, the decline of somebody's eyes, right? They're healing them. And so when a miracle happens, basically it's the same thing. It's essentially God doing the same thing. God, in this case, is disrupting the natural decline when someone has a disease or an injury or something like that. Now, honestly, I think for most of us, I don't think we really have an issue with this. I think this is fairly straightforward. I think it makes sense that if God exists, if God still works today, he would be able to stop a disease. I don't think in theory that is like a controversial thing to say or a difficult thing to understand. I think for most of us, our issue with miracles is that we've never seen them. I think that is for most of us our issue with miracles. Because we've never seen them, most of us, we're kind of closed off from considering that they happen. I think that's probably most of our issues. That's certainly my issue. But let me just give another illustration here. Imagine that you are this person. You live in a tribe in a desert. It's your own people group. You were born in the desert. You grew up in the desert. You've never left the desert. You have no access to anything outside of the desert, just you and your people group, no internet. And then one day, an outsider appears. And this outsider comes and he visits your tribe, and obviously you guys don't speak the same language, so it takes a few months or maybe years to actually communicate. And then after some time, after you're able to communicate, one day the traveler tries to describe something to you that you've never heard about. And the traveler says, there's this flaky, clear substance that falls from the sky in his part of the world. And it's really cold, and it's actually made of the same thing that water's made out of, which I know of. I know of water, but it's kind of hard. He calls it snow. And when this thing called snow accumulates, it looks like piles of white powder, as he describes. Okay. If you're this person who was born and raised in the desert, all you know is a desert, how would you respond to this traveler telling you about this like so-called snow? I think you kind of have two options, right? The first option is you could say, that's ridiculous. Hard water, piles of cold powder that falls from the sky. I've never seen that. Nobody I know has ever seen that. I don't believe that. Okay, that's certainly a response. Okay. I think a different response is to say, okay, I've never heard of snow, but I will have an open mind. If you show me evidence for this so-called snow, then I'll consider it. Just show me your evidence and I'll consider it. And that's basically what we're exploring today with miracles. Just, is there any evidence? Can we have an open mind? And that's kind of what I had to ask myself as well. Now, let me tell you a little bit of my journey when I started to research this topic. And the first thing that I kind of realized personally for me was, it seems like there's a lot of people out there who claim to have experienced a miracle. That's the first thing I recognized. For instance, 10 years ago, there was this survey done by this organization called Barna. And they did this survey on over 1,000 Americans on various questions about miracles. Okay. Some of the questions are pretty surface level, like questions I didn't really care for, like this one. Like, can people be physically healed supernaturally by God? Like, I don't know. Who cares what people think? I don't know. Other questions are like, have you ever prayed for God to heal people? Okay. Very surface level. Doesn't mean a whole lot to me how people answer. But one of the questions was really interesting to me. One of the questions was this: have you personally ever experienced a physical healing that could only be explained as a miraculous healing and not solely as a result of a normal process, medical procedure, or the body healing itself? Okay. So basically, they're just asking, do you think you've ever experienced a miracle? And I appreciate that they actually try to define it, right? Like something that's not from a medical procedure. So it's not from surgery, not from chemo, nothing like that. It was not the body just kind of naturally healing itself. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Okay. Now, curious what people think about this. Don't say this out loud, but just in your mind, like, try to take a guess. What percentage of the Americans in this survey do you think said yes? They themselves, they personally have experienced a miracle. You don't need to shout out your answer, but just in your mind, just have a percentage in there. What percentage of Americans do you think said, yes, I experienced a miracle? Okay. Hope you have a number. This was their result. 27% of the adults that they surveyed said yes. They themselves personally feel like they have experienced a miracle. Okay. Judging from some of the reactions, I'd say that's probably higher than what you expected. Certainly was way higher than what I expected. 27%, like over a quarter. I was very surprised. However, I'll also say, didn't really care about this number either. This number obviously includes everybody, including Christians, right? So, I don't know, maybe some Christians are biased, maybe they didn't read the question carefully. Okay. Wasn't super meaningful, but it was interesting. Thankfully, they did kind of ask people to describe like what was their faith, whether they had a faith or not. And what was interesting to me was how many people who said they didn't have faith, they had no faith, so they were atheist or agnostic, but they still answered yes to this question. And this was the percentage. 8% of the people who self-identify as having no faith, atheist or agnostic, said, yes, I'm an atheist, but I believe I experienced a miracle. just really strange stuff. Like I really couldn't, I had to dig into the details of this. I was like, 8%? 8% of people with no faith said that they experienced a miracle. Why would they say they experienced a miracle if they don't even believe in a God? Did not make any sense to me. But it did make me realize, okay, it's a big world out there. Okay, I need to expand my horizons a little bit. It's a big world out there. Very similar stat was from this book right here. This book called The South Indian Pentecostal Movement in the 20th Century. Just very riveting, very academic title. I'm sure you're on Amazon right now. Like, I got to buy this book. This was written in 1981 by this scholar named Michael Burgunder. He teaches at the University of Heidelberg. And he studied the spread of the Christian Pentecostal movement in South India. Okay? And he had a bunch of things in his research. But the most interesting stat to me, very similar to the one we just looked at, was this stat right here. In his survey, it showed that 10% of the non-Christians that he surveyed in South India claimed to have experienced a miracle. Again, 10%, very high number. I don't have this other stat on this slide, but that number jumps to 20% when you ask how many non-Christians have heard of somebody healed, heard of somebody who has experienced a miracle. That number jumps to 20%. Again, these are just studies, but fairly eye-opening. One last stat. In 2011, there was this book published by Oxford Academic, this Oxford University's publishing company, so legit stuff. They published this book that was investigating the global Pentecostal movement. Okay, so not just South India, but the global Pentecostal movement, which is very associated with healing. Written by this author named Candy Gunther Brown. I think she teaches in Indiana. She did her PhD at Harvard. This is what she writes in her intro. She says, in the Latin American, Asian, and African countries where Pentecostal growth is occurring most rapidly, as many to 80 to 90% of first-generation Christians attribute their conversions primarily to having received divine healing for themselves or a family member. 80 to 90%. By the way, when she says first-generation Christian here, what she means is they are the first people in their family to become Christians. 80 to 90%. Why do I bring this all up? First of all, let me just summarize all the stats here. It's just AI, I did not make this, but so we saw, 8% of American non-Christians claim to have experienced a miracle, 10% of South Indian non-Christians claim to have experienced a miracle, and then 80 to 90% of first-generation Christians in what's called the Global South, so Latin America, Asia, Africa, they claim to have experienced a miracle. Now, why is this significant to me? This is 3 different studies from 3 different scholars and organizations, all basically showing miracles happen today. They're not like Christian organizations, or maybe Barna is, but not these latter 2. This is, Oxford Press, right? 3 different studies showing the same thing. There are a lot of miraculous claims around the world. So, stats are interesting, at least to me. They are stats like this, basketball stats, movie stats. Okay, stats are, I'm a big stats guy, okay? But at the end of the day, I'm also very interested in details. And so while these stats are great, for me at this point, I still felt like, okay, I still want to kind of drill down into some actual stories and see, are they actually miraculous? Are they credible? Are they professionally documented from a third party? I want to see, is there stuff like that? That's the kind of stuff that's actually really interesting to me. And I was actually surprised. There are a lot of them. I can't walk you through everything. Let me just give you a couple. This is a guy named Greg Spencer, His story is noted in a number of books and also a documentary. Greg was a police officer for 15 years. And apparently his time as a police officer was really challenging. He worked in the narcotics department. So he was exposed to a lot of dark stuff, a lot of murder, a lot of violence, just heavy, heavy stuff. It really disturbed him. And so after 15 years, he finally left law enforcement and he decided to begin a new career, driving trucks across the country. Only 6 months into his new career, he starts to notice that his eyesight is deteriorating. And so he goes to get it checked out by some doctors. They examine him, and it turns out that he has this condition that's called macular degeneration, okay, which is incurable. It's irreversible. And so his vision has declined to this point where he is legally blind. So obviously his truck driving days are over, so he applies for disability from the state of Oregon. He starts getting disability benefits, right, money from the government. He goes to the Oregon Commission for the Blind. He trains to live as a blind man. He trains to use a guide dog and how to use a cane, all that stuff. That's his life. And then around this time, he meets this woman. Her name is Wendy. She's a believer. She brings Greg to church. And Greg at this time is not a believer. Not yet. But he's open to it and he starts to go to church with her. Eventually, he decides to go on this men's retreat. And interestingly, the theme of the retreat is cleansing the mind. Cleansing the mind. And it could not have been a more appropriate topic for him. Because little did everybody know, he was still really haunted by all the stuff that he saw as a police officer. He still dreamed of it. He could not get that stuff out of his mind. So one day, after one of the sessions in the retreat, he's sitting in the back of the chapel, and he just prays. He just says, Lord, please cleanse my mind. Would you please take this junk away from me? Set me free. Yeah, that's what he says. And he says in the documentary that shortly after he prays his prayer, he opens his eyes, he looks out at the rest of the chapel, and he realizes he can read the exit sign. He can make out the word exit. He looks out the window. He can see the birds out sitting in the trees. He walks outside. He's reading all the license plates. His sight has been restored. Now, there are a lot of stories like that of people's eyesight being healed. Here's the reason why I like this one. I don't know Greg, right? None of us know Greg. I can't verify this miracle myself. But we don't have to verify this because you know who did verify it? The state of Oregon had to verify it, right? Greg, he was getting disability payments, right, as a legally blind person. And so after he gets healed, Greg does the right thing. He applies to get off of disability, right? Get rid of his disability benefits. What do you think the state of Oregon thinks when you try to say that your incurable eye disease has been healed, right? You think they're going to take that lightly? Greg goes, he tells the state of Oregon he's been healed and he needs to get off of disability. I'm sure he wants to get back to work as well. You know what the state does? They put him under investigation for fraud. He has to go through, I think, like over a year of investigation. The state has to assess, was he really blind, and now is he really healed, right? And so long story short, after numerous medical exams, the state clears him from fraud. Now, what I really like is that the documentary shows some of the original documentation that he had. And this was a letter, you probably can't read it, but it was written back in 1999. This was the original or a copy of the letter where it explicitly states that he is legally blind, okay? That he has this degeneration disease of the eye. and he requires governmental support. This is from the Oregon Health and Science University. Documentary also shows a screenshot of the letter from the doctor confirming Greg's vision has returned. It's 2030, no degeneration remaining. And again, this is the kind of stuff that's really interesting to me, because this is multiple third parties, right, independent of Greg, not Christian, right, Oregon State, several universities, several doctors, but they're verifying this guy had a disease, and now it's gone. There are a lot of examples like this one. Now let me just, really quickly, let me just go back and let me just ask a question that maybe I should have asked earlier. And that question is this: what counts as a miracle? Like, what even counts? That's actually a really hard question, surprisingly. I think actually if you surveyed us, we might all have maybe slightly different responses of what counts technically as a miracle. For me, I'd say I probably lean a little bit more skeptical than most people. I'd say that if you're going to claim that you experienced a miracle, it has to be something like really serious. And so if you just have like the cold or the flu, I'm happy to say that you've been healed. Honestly, I would have loved for all of us. Man, there were like a couple flus that spread through this church. I hated it. Got sick twice this season. I would have loved for us to be healed from that. I don't know if I'd call that a miracle. I think that's a little far. I'd be very happy. Just hold on to this thought for a second. Let me just walk through one more example. There's this town in France called Lourdes. And in that town, there's this Catholic site that's called the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes. 60 Minutes actually did a story on them. 60 Minutes, not exactly a Christian organization, but they do investigative reporting. And every year, something like 3 million people go and they visit this site, the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes. The reason why people visit this site is because ever since the late 1800s, there have been thousands of healings that have been reported at this site. Okay. I think since then, 7,000 healings reportedly have taken place there. Okay. Now, what's interesting, obviously the Catholic Church knows about all this. They know that there have been 7,000 reported healings. They do not consider all of them to be miracles. Okay. Out of the 7,000, they only recognize 72 as official miracles. Okay. And the reason why is because they are really stringent and rigorous in determining what actually qualifies as a miracle. Here is their criteria, okay? This is the Catholic Church's criteria for what they call a miracle. They have 7 pieces. The first says the illness had to be very serious. Okay, so me and the Catholic state, we agree. Okay, it has to be very serious. It can't be the flu. The illness has to be known to modern medicine. Okay, so it can't be something that you just made up, you brought on the spot. I'm sick of this. You're the only one. It has to be known to modern medicine. Number 3, the illness had to be medically measurable. So that means it has to be actually visible on some scan. Okay, some exams, some tests. It has to be objective. And number 4, the healing was not due to a medical procedure. So they're not against you getting some treatment prior to your healing or anything like that, but the healing can't be from a treatment or a surgery or anything like that. Number 5, the healing was sudden and instantaneous. And this is the one that is, I think, very stringent. Okay. Their actual words are sudden, instantaneous, immediate, and without a period of recovery. Okay. And what they mean is you don't have to show a healing on the spot at that site, but let's say you went home, that healing had to be pretty much immediate. It couldn't have been like, oh, over the course of the year, my cancer went away. It can't be anything like that. Okay. Number 6, the person had to fully regain normal function. So you can't just have like, oh, I feel better now. No, you have to be back to normal completely. And number 7, the healing had to last permanently. Okay? so it can't come back later. So that's actually why they actually wait several years before they declare something to be a miracle. So again, they have documented 72 over the years that have fit all of this criteria. They put it through a lot of scrutiny. Again, 60 Minutes, they ran a story featuring one of these miracles, kind of highlighting one of them. And this miracle account is this is a woman named Bernadette. She lived most of her adult life in pain. She had this rare condition that affected her spine. She was like partially paralyzed. Her foot was twisted. She couldn't walk without braces. She was in so much pain that apparently she took morphine every day. By 2008, she had tried every treatment available. The doctor said that this was a permanent disability. So she decides, from a suggestion by a doctor, she decides to visit Lourdes. And at Lourdes, nothing happens at first. Actually, I think she says that she felt physically worse. Like spiritually, she felt cool, but physically, she felt worse, okay? And then after she's back home, after 3 days, there was this moment that she felt this like warmth through her body, which is actually a pretty typical thing that most people say they experience when they experience a miracle. She felt this warm sensation throughout her body. She hears this command telling her to remove her leg braces. And then she does, and then she's able to straighten out her twisted foot. Her pain goes away. She's able to stand. She's able to walk. So now, what does she do? She thinks she's been healed. She reports this to the Lourdes committee, this committee at Lourdes, the Office of Medical Observations. And what they do at this point is they examine all of her medical records, all of the medical documentation. She is sent to multiple neurologists. She's sent to specialists. She gets a bunch of tests done. All so that they could basically check, yes, she really had this disease, but now she no longer has it. After years of tests, finally her case is sent to what's called the International Medical Committee of Lourdes. And it's this panel of 33 doctors, professors, representing multiple countries, representing different specialties. And their task is basically just to ask one question. Their question is, could this cure be explained medically? Is this cure medically explainable at all? Or is it unexplainable? That's really their question. I thought it was really funny that 60 Minutes, they described this committee as the devil's advocates, which I think is a funny and ironic phrase to call them. But that's basically what they're doing. They're just trying to press this thing and see, are there any explanations? Right? They're debating with each other. They're challenging each other. You know how long they spend debating her case? They spend 8 years debating her case. But then at the end of the 8 years, the committee concludes, yes, this healing was sudden, complete, lasting, and it cannot be explained by modern medicine. Okay. I think the documentary said that, or 60 Minutes said that her case was reviewed by hundreds of physicians. They estimate 300 physicians. And then so finally, after 10 years, 2018, Bernadette's case is officially recognized as the 70th miracle of Lourdes. So I guess since then there have been 2 more. Now, I value stuff like this because I just appreciate that, again, it's not just one person on a blog saying he got healed or she got healed. This is multiple people, multiple third parties investigating one thing. It's rigorously documented. It's peer-reviewed, right? Now, I'm not the only person who was impressed by these standards. There's this doctor named Jacqueline Duffin, and even though she is an atheist, she's still an atheist, she was really impressed by the documentation of what they do at Lourdes. In 1987, Jacqueline was asked to review some blood marrow samples. And she didn't know what it was for. Okay? So she reviews it, And I was watching this interview where she kind of describes it, and she says, I was worried that it was for a lawsuit. I thought I was going to have to face some lawyer, so I was really careful reading these blood marrow samples. And the samples were really clear. Whoever this woman was, she had a very aggressive form of leukemia, but then eventually it went into remission. Okay? The leukemia went away. She never knew what it was for until later on she found out that what she was doing was she was actually one of the blind reviewers for the Catholic Church, reviewing a supposed healing or miracle. Okay? So she was just supposed to be this neutral party reviewing this for the Catholic Church. And because of that, she says, I was very intrigued by this process. Okay? Again, she's an atheist, right? She's finding all this stuff out, and she says, I was very interested especially in how much investigation was placed specifically on the scientific aspects of this case. It was so rigorous, that's what she says. She says, it was so rigorous, in fact, that I'm someone who describes herself as an atheist. I began to wonder about all the other miracles that have been credited to God. She says, this was a turning point in my life. I ended up studying 1,400 miracles reported by the Catholic Church. I wrote this in a book, and it was published in 2009. Okay, here's the book. Okay. Medical Miracles, Doctors, Saints, and Healings in the Modern World. Okay. She's published other books since then as well. Now, I thought one of the most interesting parts of the interview was where she kind of describes what she believes about miracles, right? She studied 1,400 of these, but she's still an atheist. Like, what does she think about this? And she says this, she says, look, the word miracle comes from the Latin word, which means to wonder or to marvel. She says, I think it's fantastic that there are things that happen that we can't explain. She says, the church would explain this by saying it is the miraculous touch of God. Do I have a problem with that as a scientist? I don't. In their interview, she also says this. She says, I do find it somewhat ironic that even though I'm an atheist, I'm giving evidence that affirms these people's prayers led to their healing. But as far as I'm concerned, these things are, quote unquote, miracles. They're things of wonder, things that I can't explain. Okay. Now, after all this kind of exploration, what I felt primarily, and what I'd like to leave you with, is honestly, for the first time in a long time, maybe for the first time in my life, in my Christian life, I felt like I was excited to pray for healing. I don't think I really ever really believed that healings were possible in my day. But after all this, I really felt excited to pray. Again, just take it from this atheist doctor, right? What is she saying? She's essentially paraphrasing the passage from Luke that we read earlier. We've seen amazing things, remarkable things, healings, unexplainable. You know me, I always like to ask, like, what do non-Christians say? Like, how do you respond to stuff like this? This is a lot of documentation. This is not fluff. And what I gather from Dr. Duffin, and as well as some other atheists I was reading, their responses to this, basically, at most, an atheist can say, okay, I see the documentation. Yes, this is medically completely unexplainable. We have no explanation for this naturally. But I don't want to attribute this. I don't want to attribute this to God. I'm just going to say we don't understand why this happens right now. But I'm not going to attribute this to God, and that's fine, right? But for me, I think, honestly, what I think is more reasonable is to say, look, like, here's this thing. Naturally, we don't understand why it happens. Biologically, medically, scientifically, we have no idea why this happens. So if we can't understand why something happens naturally, isn't it fair just to call it supernatural from God? Now, I don't want to skip this question, but I think it's important. It's probably a question you have in the back of your mind, and that's the question of, what about when God doesn't heal? I know many of us are experiencing situations where God did not heal, even though we prayed. And that is a feeling that words can't really capture how painful that is. This is really a whole sermon unto itself. Pastor Chen definitely touched on this topic when he covered evil and suffering a few months ago. For now, I'll touch on it a little bit. I just want to say this. I never defined what a miracle was, okay, for reasons that I described earlier. Because number one, there's really no consensus. Even in the Christian community, there's no consensus for this is what qualifies as a miracle. It's ironically really hard to define. But if there is one aspect of miracles that everybody agrees on as far as Christian theologians, it would be this. Every Christian theologian that you read will tell you that miracles, at the end of the day, are signs. That's what they are in essence. A miracle is a sign. And what theologians mean is that miracles, at the end of the day, they're not final in and of themselves, right? Signs, they point you to something, right? Here's a sign to 20 miles to Fremont. Okay? Here's a sign pointing to New York City. Signs are not final in and of themselves. They point to something. And everybody will say, look, that's what miracles are. Miracles are just signs. Even when they happen, they don't last forever, right? Even the greatest miracles, like Lazarus rising from the dead. Lazarus was healed, raised from the dead, but one day Lazarus passed away again. Miracles are not forever, but they're signs. They are reminders of what God is going to do in the future. We believe as Christians that God, you could describe him as a consuming fire. And one of the reasons you can describe him as that is because one day God's going to come down as a fire, and he's going to burn away all the sin in our world, all the suffering, all the pain. He's going to do that one day, and he's going to bring in the new heavens and the earth. But until that day happens, miracles are just like sparks of fire. They're just like little embers. They're just little sparks in the present to give us a taste of the future. Miracles are signs. Now, at this time, I want to invite up the worship team to come up and play some instrumental music for us in the background. And I know we're already over time, but I just want to give us a minute to just kind of, in light of what we just learned, to just pray for somebody in your life. Pray for somebody who needs healing. I'm going to give you guys a minute to just sit there in silence, pray to yourself for somebody in your life who needs healing, and then after a minute I'll close. Oh Lord, we come to you this morning humbled by the suffering of this world. And Lord, I know that everybody in here can think of a loved one who has suffered some sort of suffering, some sort of disease that you wish has been healed. We come to you humbled by life. But we look to you as the one who can grant both physical healing and spiritual healing. And we ask you, God, in your powerful name, would you heal our loved ones? And Lord, for those of us who are walking through a season of grief, we ask that you would help us to see what your miracles point to, the new heavens and the new earth. Lord Jesus, come. Amen.